The stars hung silently over the Valorian capital, but the silence did not bring peace. Queen Serath sat on her throne, her hands resting lightly on the cold arms of the chair, but her mind was heavy with worry. The Empire of Valoria, once the brightest power in the galaxy, was crumbling. Worlds she had never even seen had turned against her. Rebellion, famine, and endless war had consumed what her ancestors had built. Her people lived in fear, and the queen herself had begun to wonder if hope was just a memory of stories told long ago. Serath had inherited a throne wrapped in chaos. The crown she wore felt heavier than gold or jewels. Every decision weighed her down. Every choice carried the possibility of death, not just her own, but of thousands of lives across countless planets. She had been trained since childhood to command armies, make alliances, and crush enemies, yet nothing she had learned seemed enough to stop the Empire's decay. Peace was the word she whispered to herself at night, but even in her dreams it seemed impossible. Peace in a world made for war was a fragile illusion. The palace around her was grand, filled with shining halls and towering statues of her ancestors. But even these walls could not hide the emptiness of her heart. Generals and ministers came and went, offering their advice in sharp tones, their eyes calculating her every weakness. Nobles plotted behind jeweled doors. Every day Serath felt the weight of the galaxy pressing down on her shoulders. She had power, yes, but power without hope felt hollow. And then the humans arrived. The human fleet appeared in Valorian space like a ripple in a pond. They were small, fragile ships carrying fragile beings from a tiny blue planet. The galaxy laughed at them. Most Valorians ignored them, believing them insignificant. But Serath was curious. Among the humans was a man named Elias Grant. Unlike the diplomats, merchants, or soldiers who had come before, Elias looked at her differently. He did not bow with empty respect or tremble in fear. He did not see her crown or her empire. He saw her. When they first met, he spoke softly with a voice that carried warmth and sincerity. "Your people deserve peace," he said simply. His words were not commands or promises to conquer. They were honest, human words filled with care and understanding. For the first time in years, Serath felt her heart respond, not as a queen, but as a woman who had carried the burden of an entire empire alone. The humans were strange creatures. Weak by Valorian standards, short-lived and fragile. And yet, there was something in Elias that no one could ignore. He had courage, not the kind learned from battle, but the kind born of compassion. He listened, he learned, he believed in the impossible. Serath had ruled her people with strategy, with intellect, with power. But Elias, he ruled with heart, Serath's advisors warned her. He is human. He cannot protect you. He cannot understand the complexities of our empire. Marrying him is foolish. But the queen felt a spark she had not felt in years, hope. Hope that perhaps peace was not an impossible dream. Perhaps the strength of a human heart, fragile though it may be, could change the course of history. And so she began to watch him. She saw the way he treated every soldier with respect, the way he spoke to the children who had been orphaned by war, the way he cared for the sick on worlds devastated by famine. His courage was quiet, but it was stronger than any army. For the first time, Serath imagined a future where she did not have to choose between bloodshed and survival. That night, as the twin moons of Valoria rose high over the palace, Serath stood on her balcony, staring at the stars. The galaxy was wide and dangerous. Rebellion simmered on every planet. Death whispered through the corridors of her mind, and yet, among the stars she saw a tiny human ship, carrying a man who believed in peace. And for the first time in her long life, the Queen of Valoria allowed herself to believe that hope could exist, that maybe, just maybe, a human could help her achieve it. Little did she know, that belief would change everything, not just for her, but for the entire galaxy. The announcement came like a shockwave through the galaxy. Queen Serath, ruler of the mighty Valorian Empire, would marry a human. The nobles of her court whispered in disbelief behind gilded doors. Warlords of distant systems laughed openly, mocking the idea. The humans were weak, short-lived, soft and fragile compared to Valorians. To put one of them beside the queen, they said, was madness. Serath, however, did not care. She had spent years listening to the doubts of others, weighing every plan, every strategy, every warning. And yet, when she thought of Elias Grant, none of the criticism mattered. Humans had always seemed fragile to her, their bodies soft and their technology simple. But this man was different. He had a courage that could not be measured in weapons or shields. He had a heart so strong that it could challenge the entire galaxy. The coronation hall shimmered with crystal chandeliers and banners that had flown over 1,000 battlefields. Valorian generals and dignitaries gathered in their finest robes, all eyes on the strange human who dared to stand beside their queen. Elias appeared calm, wearing a simple suit instead of ceremonial armor. He held Serath's hand gently yet firmly. It was not a gesture of power, it was a gesture of trust. When he spoke his vows, the room fell silent. His voice was steady yet filled with emotion. He did not promise to conquer worlds or wield Valorian power. He promised peace. He promised to stand with her, not above her. And in that moment, the queen saw the truth. Humans did not fight because they loved war. They fought because they loved life. They loved each other. They fought for hope when all seemed lost. The court murmured, shocked at the simplicity and honesty of his words. Many nobles could not understand why Serath, a queen born for command and conquest, would choose a human over a Valorian prince or a seasoned general. Some saw weakness, others danger. But the queen felt something she had not felt in decades, a spark of hope. After the ceremony, the newlyweds walked through the palace gardens, under the light of the twin moons. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of flowers that had survived the Empire's many wars. Serath looked at Elias and felt a strange mixture of wonder and relief. Here was a man who had no crown, no armies, no titles, and yet he made her feel safe. "Why do you stay?" she asked quietly. "You do not belong here. You could return to your home, your people. You could live a peaceful life." Elias smiled. "I did not come to rule," he said softly. "I came to protect the dream of someone who believes in peace. That is enough for me." It was not just his words, it was his presence. He did not bend to the weight of the crown. He did not fear the whispers of the nobles. He looked at her as an equal, as someone whose dreams mattered as much as the empire itself. And the people began to notice. Soldiers saw Elias moving among them, offering help, listening, learning. The children who had survived battles smiled when he approached. Even the sick and wounded felt hope in his touch. In a world ruled by power and fear, he brought something no one had seen in generations: compassion that could inspire strength. That night, as Serath gazed from her balcony once again, she realized the truth. The galaxy might mock their union. Warlords might laugh. Nobles might plot against them. But she no longer feared for her people, or for herself, because she had found something more powerful than any army, more enduring than any crown. She had found a human who believed in her dream, who believed in her. And with him she began to believe too, that perhaps even a fractured empire could one day know peace. Little did Serath know that the human she had married would soon become the single greatest force the galaxy had ever seen. Not through weapons, but through courage, heart, and a belief stronger than fear itself. For a short while, peace seemed possible. The palace hummed with quiet hope as Serath and Elias worked together. The queen guided the empire with her wisdom, while Elias moved among the people with his human ingenuity. He introduced new ideas, simple ways to rebuild broken worlds and feed starving children. Hospitals reopened, schools filled with laughter, factories once abandoned roared back to life. For the first time in decades, Valoria seemed alive again, yet peace is always fragile. Beyond the galaxy's edge, the warlords watched. They were powerful, merciless, and proud. They had ruled by fear and strength for centuries, and now they saw a queen who sought something they could not understand. They saw a human, weak, short-lived, fragile, beside her, and they whispered among themselves, If Valoria could be ruled by compassion instead of power, their empires built on terror and blood would crumble. And they could not allow that. Rebellion began slowly. A small fleet attacked a remote Valorian colony. Sarath's generals prepared to strike back, but Elias hesitated. He walked through the command center, listening to every report, weighing every choice. Unlike Valorians, he did not see violence as the first answer. He saw the people scared and desperate, and he knew that war was a tool of last resort. "Do not fight if you can protect without bloodshed," Elias said firmly. "Every life lost is a failure, not a victory." The general scoffed. To them his words were foolish. To Sarath they were brilliant. They reminded her of what she had always wanted, not just to survive, but to save her people. But rebellion grows like a shadow in the dark. Soon skirmishes spread across multiple star systems. Warlords struck at trade routes, intercepted supply convoys, and sent messages of terror to the capital. The people whispered that peace was an illusion. Even Sarath sometimes wondered if her dream of a peaceful empire was a dangerous fantasy. One evening, as the twin moons rose high in the sky, Sarath stood on the balcony overlooking the capital city. The glow of the towers reflected in her eyes, but her heart was heavy. "Maybe I am too weak," she murmured. "Maybe I am not fit to rule." Elias stepped beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You are not weak," he said softly. "You are the queen who wants to save lives, not destroy them. That is true strength, and it is why people will follow you, even when the galaxy shakes with fear." She looked at him, her eyes searching for the courage she needed, and she found it. Not in the crown she wore, nor in the armies she commanded, but in the human who had chosen to stand with her. The next day, the warlords launched a coordinated strike on the capital itself. Fire and smoke filled the skies. Palace guards ran through corridors shouting orders. Sarath watched as her people faced destruction. Her heart clenched with fear, but Elias remained calm. He moved among the defenders, organizing them, offering reassurance. His voice carried across the chaos. "Hold the line. Protect each other. We are not alone." And slowly the people listened. Soldiers who had been ready to surrender found courage. Civilians ran to help one another. Even the wounded rose, inspired by the determination in his eyes. When the first wave of attackers finally reached the palace gates, they were met with a force unlike anything they expected. Not just Valorian soldiers, but humans and Valorians working together. Elias's strategy, simple and direct, turned the defenders into a wall of hope. It was not brute strength that held the gates, it was unity, compassion, and the belief that they could survive. Sarath realized, with a mix of awe and fear, that this human, this fragile man from a distant world, had changed everything. He had no weapons more powerful than words, no enhancements, no alien strength. Yet somehow, through heart, courage, and understanding, he had turned fear into power. And in that moment the Queen understood something she had never realized. The galaxy did not need more violence. It needed humans. Elias had no Valorian enhancements, no centuries of battle experience, no royal blood to claim authority. And yet, when the Empire teetered on the brink of collapse, he became its most powerful force. Not through sheer strength, not through weapons, not through fear, but through a mind that thought differently, like no one had ever seen in the galaxy before. He walked through the command center, observing the chaos around him. Valorian generals barked orders, their voices sharp with panic. Soldiers scrambled, unsure where to move. But Elias remained calm. His eyes scanned every map, every report, every communication feed. He saw patterns others missed. He connected dots others ignored. And most importantly, he saw the people, not just as pawns in a war, but as lives to protect. "What we need," he said quietly, but with authority that could not be ignored, "is not more fighting. We need strategy, coordination, and trust. Every soldier, every civilian, every ship. If we work together, we can protect the Empire without losing what we fight to save." At first, the generals scoffed. Humans were weak, yes, but words could not win battles. They believed in firepower, in intimidation, in centuries of military tradition. Elias listened patiently, then began implementing plans that were simple yet brilliant. He reorganized supply lines, ensuring no planet went without food. He merged human engineering techniques with Valorian technology to create defenses that could adapt to attacks. He did not command through fear, he inspired. Slowly, the soldiers began to notice. His presence was different. He walked among them, listening, encouraging, helping. When a young Valorian recruit hesitated in the middle of a skirmish, Elias stepped forward, calm and steady. "You can do this," he said. "I believe in you. And so do the people who need you alive." The soldiers looked at each other, then back at him. Something stirred, a spark of courage they had not felt in years. It spread like wildfire. When humans and Valorians fought side by side, their coordination was unmatched. What had seemed impossible, the defense of the capital against multiple warlord fleets, was now achievable. Sarath watched all of this, her heart full of awe. She had ruled the Empire with intellect, with power, with strategy, and yet it was this human standing quietly in the middle of chaos who changed everything. She realized that true power did not always roar. Sometimes it whispered. Sometimes it came in the form of understanding, courage, and unwavering belief in others. Over the next weeks, Elias's influence grew. Messages of his strategies spread across the Empire. People began to fight not for fear of punishment, but because they wanted to protect the dream he and Sarath shared, a dream of a galaxy where peace could exist. Factories rebuilt weapons not to conquer but to defend. Scientists worked tirelessly, adapting human designs to Valorian technology, and soldiers, once worn down by endless battles, stood taller, inspired by a man who should not have had any power at all. The warlords, who expected an easy victory against a queen who had chosen compassion over conquest, began to falter. Their attacks were met with unity, strategy, and determination. They could not understand how one human so fragile could change the tides of war. Every victory Elias inspired, every life he saved, was a challenge to the very idea that humans were weak. One evening, after a particularly hard-fought battle, Sarath found him in the command center, reviewing reports long after the soldiers had left. She placed a hand on his shoulder silently. He looked up and smiled, tired but unbroken. "You are changing everything," she said softly. "Not just the Empire. The galaxy itself." Elias shrugged lightly. "I am only doing what humans do best," he said. "We fight, not for glory, not for crowns, but for the people we love. That is all the power we need." Sarath nodded, her eyes glistening. In him she saw the hope she had always longed for. In him she saw the impossible made real. The galaxy had underestimated humans for centuries, and now, through a single man, that mistake would cost them dearly. The galaxy trembled that night. Warlords who had long thought the Valorian Empire weak now unleashed their full fury. Ships streaked across the stars, firing missiles and energy beams, striking at every planet that had once been loyal. The capital was their ultimate prize, the throne of Queen Sarath itself. Fires burned across the city, smoke twisting into the sky, and alarms echoed through the palace halls. Sarath watched from her balcony as explosions lit the horizon. Her heart pounded, not just with fear for herself but with worry for every life in the Empire. Civilians ran through streets filled with debris. Soldiers scrambled to defend the gates, and everywhere she looked, chaos reigned. Her crown felt impossibly heavy on her head. For the first time, she wondered if all her efforts, all her dreams of peace, had been in vain. Elias was already in the thick of it. He moved with calm precision through the command center, his eyes scanning every report, every transmission, every battlefield update. Soldiers and officers followed his instructions without question, not because of fear, but because they believed in him. When he spoke, his voice carried through the chaos. "Focus. Protect the people first. Every life matters. We hold together or we fall apart." A strike hit one of the palace towers. Smoke and fire filled the corridors, and cries of panic rang out. Without hesitation, Elias ran toward the danger, pulling children and injured citizens to safety. He ignored the fear that gripped everyone around him. He ignored the pain in his own arm when a falling beam grazed him. To him, the lives of others were worth more than his own. Sarath could barely keep her fear at bay. She wanted to rush to him to pull him away from danger, but she knew she could not. He had always been brave, but this was beyond anything she had seen. When she finally saw him emerge from the smoke, guiding a group of children through the burning halls, her heart ached and swelled with admiration. "You are only human," she whispered under her breath, tears brimming in her eyes. "And yet, you are more than anything I have ever known." Elias smiled, blood streaked on his arm, ash on his face, yet his eyes shone with determination. "Then maybe being human is enough," he said, quietly but firmly. The defenders of the palace began to rally. Inspired by Elias's courage, soldiers who had trembled with fear stood taller. Civilians who had fled returned to help. Engineers repaired defenses in the middle of explosions. Even the wounded rose to fight, moved by the example of a man who risked everything for them. Sarath took command of her own guards, her voice steady, though her heart trembled. Together with Elias, she coordinated the defense, finding gaps in the enemy lines, striking where the warlords least expected it. Every victory, no matter how small, felt like a spark in the darkness, a spark that could ignite hope in the hearts of the people. Hours passed like minutes. Fire and smoke consumed parts of the palace, yet the defenders held. The HFY, her lords who had expected an easy conquest, found themselves facing a force stronger than weapons: unity, courage, heart. When the first light of the twin moons fell across the city, the palace still stood. Not unscathed, not unscarred, but standing, and at its center, guiding the survivors, was Elias, a human, fragile, fleeting, and yet invincible in ways the galaxy could not yet understand. Sarath knelt beside him, her hand resting on his arm. "You've done more than I could ever imagine," she said, voice trembling. "You've saved the Empire." He looked at her, exhaustion in his eyes, but pride too. "No," he said softly. "We saved it. Together." And in that moment the Queen realized something she had always hoped to believe. Sometimes true power does not roar. Sometimes it simply shines through the courage of a human heart. The galaxy had expected Valoria to fall. They thought a queen who dreamed of peace and a human beside her could not defend an empire built on war. They were wrong. After the assault on the capital, Elias moved swiftly. He did not waste time celebrating survival. Instead, he analyzed every attack, every weakness, every failing in the defenses. Where Valorian saw complexity, Elias saw patterns. Where generals panicked, he stayed calm. Slowly, quietly, he began to turn the tide. He combined Valorian power with human innovation. Ships that had once moved blindly in formation were now coordinated, their firepower synchronized to strike enemies precisely. Planets that had been left vulnerable were reinforced, not with massive fleets but with clever strategies, hidden defenses, and resourceful tactics that turned the galaxy's own warlords against them. Every move was calculated to save lives, yet also to win. Sarath watched in awe as her human husband became more than a partner. He became a legend in the making. Soldiers whispered his name like a blessing. "Elias," they said, "he fights not for glory but for us. He fights for life." And they followed him with loyalty that had never existed before, inspired not by fear, but by trust. For the first time, the warlords faced a force they could not predict. They tried to crush Valoria with sheer numbers. They sent strike fleets to every system, believing fear would break the defenders. But each attack was met with precision. Each assault was countered not by overwhelming strength, but by the brilliance of a human mind that could see where others could not. Elias walked among the battle stations, calm and focused. "Do not fight because you are told," he said to the soldiers. "Fight because you believe in protecting what matters. Fight because you are stronger together. One life saved, one world defended. That is more powerful than 1,000 victories taken by force." The soldiers listened. Slowly, system by system, the Empire began to rise. Planets that had once burned under warlord control were reclaimed, not with the cruelty of conquest, but with careful planning that minimized loss. Trade routes reopened, refugees returned home, families were reunited, hope spread across the galaxy like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Sarath realized something she had never truly understood. The galaxy had underestimated humans for centuries. They thought humans weak, fragile, and short-lived. Yet here was one human standing beside her, changing the course of history with nothing but courage, intelligence, and a heart that would not quit. And it was not just the victories that mattered. It was what he taught the people of Valoria, that strength did not come from weapons alone. Strength came from courage, from unity, from believing in something greater than yourself. That lesson spread faster than any fleet. It became a force no warlord could calculate, no empire could destroy. One evening, after a long day of coordinating fleets and planning defenses, Sarath found Elias gazing at the stars from the palace balcony. His face was tired, etched with exhaustion, yet there was a calm determination in his eyes. "You've done the impossible," she said softly. "You've turned our despair into hope and our fear into power." Elias smiled faintly, shaking his head. "I did not do it alone. The people did this with me. You did this with me. Humans are simple, but we fight for life, for love, for hope, and that is stronger than anything else in the galaxy." Sarath leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his presence. "The galaxy underestimated you," she whispered. "But I never did." Elias took her hand. "Then we will show them what humans can do," he said. "Together we can make peace stronger than war." And with that, the awakening had begun. Valoria, guided by the courage of a human mind and the heart of a queen, was no longer a fractured empire. It was a force of hope, a power no warlord could break, and a light that could shine across the galaxy. The warlords had underestimated them. The galaxy had laughed at a queen who believed in peace and a human who seemed too fragile to matter. But now, the tides had turned, and the empire they had tried to destroy stood stronger than ever. Valoria had changed. Planets that once suffered under warlord rule thrived again. Cities were rebuilt, trade routes reopened, and schools filled with children who laughed for the first time in years. The people remembered the terror of war, but they also remembered hope. A hope that had come from one human, a man who believed in something greater than himself. Elias Grant never sought glory. He did not desire a crown or a place in history. He fought not for power but for life, for love, and for the dream of peace he shared with Queen Sarath. And though the battles were over, the cost had been great. Elias had been wounded many times, and the final battle had left him weakened. Yet he stood beside Sarath, smiling faintly, his eyes filled with the same quiet courage that had inspired an entire galaxy. The queen looked at him, tears in her eyes. "You've given them everything," she whispered. "You've given me everything. You've given the Empire hope." He shook his head, a soft smile on his lips. "No," he said, his voice gentle. "We gave them hope together. You believed in peace when no one else did. I just reminded them how to fight for it." Sarath took his hand in hers. The warmth of his human touch brought comfort she had never known. "The galaxy underestimates humans," she said softly. "But I have never underestimated you." Elias chuckled, a sound that was almost music amid the stillness of the palace after the chaos. "Then it is enough," he said. "Enough to show them what we can do." The news spread across the empire. Songs were sung about the queen who refused to bow and the human who fought not for war but for life. Stories told of how a man with no enhancements, no centuries of training, no alien power, had changed the fate of countless worlds simply by believing in others. Children grew up learning that courage and love could be more powerful than the strongest weapons. In the final council, Sarath addressed the galaxy. Her voice was steady, but her heart overflowed with emotion. "Power is not in our ships, our armies, or our crowns," she said. "Power is in the hands we hold, the lives we protect, and the dreams we share. One man has shown us this, a human. My husband. Her words echoed across star systems, through every city and every world. The message was simple, but it carried weight no warlord could deny. A single human standing beside a queen who refused to abandon hope had proven that compassion and courage could be stronger than fear. Years later, when the Empire remembered the wars, they remembered Elias not just as a man but as a symbol. His name was spoken with reverence, his deeds passed down from parent to child, generation to generation. The Empire had survived not because of conquest but because of humanity. Serath ruled for many more years, but she never forgot the man who had changed everything. In quiet moments, she would stand under the twin moons looking at the stars and remember the human who taught her that the impossible could become real. The galaxy had doubted them. The warlords had tried to break them. But in the end, a queen had sought peace, and her human husband had brought power beyond imagination. And that power, born not of domination, but of heart, courage, and love, would shine across the stars forever.